All right, hello again. Jeff Scott of Blackhawk Technical College. We have two more chapters to go through in our SAM's Teach Yourself Bootstrap in 24 Hours text. They are Chapter 22, where I am right now, making Bootstrap accessible, and Chapter 23, which is going to be more on Less and Sas, and we'll do that one next. As you can see, as always, we have our four objectives. Remember, these tapes are being made for the 152, 158 Advanced Website Development class for the fall 2016 semester. So we have, again, four objectives. We want to learn what web accessibility is, some general accessibility rules, how to improve Bootstrap accessibility, and specific things you can do to make your site more accessible. Accessibility is one of those website designs that many designers either don't know about or ignore, hoping it will solve itself, which is about as dumb as you can be. There are some things you can do to ensure that people using any kind of an assistive device can use your site. Now think about this. If it turns out that you're trying to promote a service, whether you're trying to sell something, get people to sign up for something, to become active in something, whatever it is, you want to reach as big of an audience as possible. And just because someone is maybe limited in a certain way doesn't mean that they can't get the entire and shouldn't get the entire experience from your site. So as mentioned, in this hour, you'll learn what accessibility means and how to make Bootstrap components and plugins accessible. You will also learn how to evaluate your site for accessibility so that you know what to do and maybe what not to do. All right, when discussing web pages, you should think inclusion. Including as many people as possible means that you will have the largest possible audience. Taking everything into consideration, including things like age, economic situation, location, and language. It means considering people, I don't like the word disabilities, we're not supposed to use that anymore. Let's just say people who are challenged in some way. Now, some people don't like the word challenge because they say we're all challenged in some ways, and that's true. Accessibility usually focuses on people with disabilities, but in general, web designers should focus on all-inclusive design. Now, just as an FYI for you, before we started, I went and typed in ADA into Google. And among the things I got up here were the ADA government homepage. But if you look here, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, as it says, it was a law that was enacted now, 26 years ago. In 1986, the National Council on Disability had recommended enactment of an Americans with Disabilities Act. All right. It was signed into law by George H.W. Bush and then signed into law by George W. Bush with changes in 2009. It's a wide-ranging civil rights law intended to protect against discrimination based on disability. All that stuff today is in the news. It's all hot. In an ideal world, we would treat everyone the same, regardless of their sex, their ethnicity, and anything else. Their religious values, it doesn't matter. The point is, we live in a world where that doesn't happen. I'm not going to go off on a tangent. I'm not going to get all political on you. I'm just going to say that what they're doing here, what they're trying to do, is to treat everyone equally. Notice it also requires covered employers to provide reasonable accommodations to employees with disabilities and imposes accessibility requirements on public accommodation, such as, how about a website? All right. According to Johns Hopkins University, web accessibility refers to a standard of inclusive website development based on the idea that information should be equally available to all people, regardless of physical or developmental abilities or impairments. Just treat everyone the same. All right. Accessible design practices. It says when you design inclusive or accessible designs, there are a few things you need to keep in mind. Number one, how do your pages look? Do you have a lot of contrast? Would a colorblind person be able to directly or to easily maneuver their way through your site and figure out what's what. How usable are your pages? What about someone who doesn't get around a website using a mouse? Are there other ways for them to get around? How does the website sound if you have sound? If someone used a screen reader, would all content be available to them in one form or another? How complicated is your site? Are there a lot of steps required to perform various tasks? The nice thing about accessibility is you don't have to make a lot of major changes to your site. You should be aware of how your site might look or sound to someone with differing abilities to your own. What a great sentence, because you know what? Everyone has differing abilities to my own. Some look at it in a better way, some in a worse way, but better or worse are relative terms. So some guidelines: provide equivalent alternatives for auditory and visual content. So if someone is deaf or blind, they should still be able to ideally experience, stuff from your site. Number 2, do not rely on color alone to convey information. We've talked about the fact that many people are colorblind. Some people are blind. Number 3, use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript correctly as per their specifications. Don't go rogue. Number 4, clarify natural language usage. Again, it's recommended that you put in HTML with your HTML tag, lang equals en for the language is English, if indeed that's what you are creating your site for. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Make sure tables are responsive. 6, provide alternatives for new technologies. Have fallback options. 7, I think this was. Allow users to control time-related content changing. Don't ever have blinking on a site. We've talked even about things with when you have your slide carousels. You might want to set it up so that the person can turn off the slide part, so they have to manually maneuver their way through there. Some people would prefer to do that. All right. Design for device independence. Big thing today. That's what Bootstrap is all about. All right. Mobile first and design for device independence. Provide contextual information, even if you think it won't be visible. We had a union meeting the other day, and they were mentioning that supposedly by July 2017, everything that we do, all my videos, etc., they will all have to be closed captioned, which is a little bit of work, because although it's supposed to be provided naturally for you by YouTube, it doesn't always work. Next, use a clear and consistent navigation structure. Again, this just makes it's just common sense. Finally, keep your pages as simple and clear as possible. Same kind of thing. All right. The WAIA in accessibility. WAIA is the Web Accessibility Initiative's Accessible Rich Internet Application Suite. As mentioned here, it defines a way to make the web more accessible to people with disabilities. It's done through the use of a bunch of attributes. The ones that are used most often are shown on the screen here. But let's quickly go over each one. ARIA controls, which tells any kind of an assistive technology device that the element is a control element. It controls the ID. ARIA describe by, it tells the assistive technology device where the descriptive text is. ARIA expanded tells the assistive technology device that the element is an expandable element like an accordion. ARIA hidden, which tells the assistive technology device that an element is hidden. ARIA invalid, as it says, if you have a form control that is invalid, you can just set the invalid to true to let the assistive technology device know that indeed it is invalid. ARIA label points to the ID of the element it is labeling. It's similar to using the for attribute on label tags. ARIA labeled by, points to the ID of the element to which it's labeled. Similar to the described by attribute up above here. ARIA pressed When set to true, it tells the assistive technology device that a button is pressed or active. Roll, which tells the assistive device what the element's purpose is. Notice, used to ensure that screen readers and other assistive technology references or devices reference the elements correctly. Finally, the title, which is an HTML attribute used to give any element a title. Some non-assistive technology browsers display the title on some elements, so be sure to test this. There's other things, but these are some of the major ones. All right, accessible design in Bootstrap. If you're following along, I'm on page 368. It says here are a number of things you can do with your Bootstrap web pages to start making your pages more accessible. First, avoid using pop-up windows. Bootstrap does not provide any built-in plugins for pop-ups. Second, use form labels and group form elements with a field set tag. Third, use placeholders and form input tags such as text area and input until all user agents handle empty controls correctly. Fourth, use alternative text. These are just things you should know about anyway. On images, but also on video, audio, and any other plugin. Next, provide text alternatives for tables. Finally, include non-linked space or text characters between adjacent links. These are some of the things you can do. Going on, bottom of page 368 to 369, skip navigation. Skip links or skip navigation is an important part of an accessible web design, especially in designs that contain a large group of navigation links at the top of the page. A skip link lets someone using an assistive technology device skip the navigation and go directly to the page content. And they show you how to do this. The bottom line is, and in a way, what I'm about to say is meant to be nice, but it almost sounds derogatory. Again, it's not meant to. But you should always try to find people that have limitations or the people who would be most affected by what you are trying to add to your site, and they should be amongst those who test the site to make sure it's set up the way you want it to be set up. A few browsers such as Chrome and IE will not focus on the skip link programmatically without the tab index attribute. So it's a good idea to include it on any element where the ID will be used as a link target. All right, nested headings. Middle of page 369. Even though HTML5 suggests that you can use the H1 tag for every headline on a page, it's better to use them in a hierarchy. The H1 tag is first and should be the title for the entire page, then the H2 for page sections, H3 for subtitles. Part of this is, again, even a bad standard is better than no standard, but quite often you're going to have web pages that will have no H1 tags on them whatsoever. But what I've always read is if you are going to have H1 tags, by and large, you need a pretty good reason to have more than one on a page. Color contrast, we've talked about this before. It says you should check colors on Bootstrap elements to ensure they have a good contrast ratio. All right. Note Bootstrap is always changing. As it says here, during the writing of this book, the Bootstrap customizer has changed. Bootstrap is constantly being updated. And again, there will be major changes when we go from version 3 plus to version 4, which is coming. Tricks for making Bootstrap sites accessible. Pages 370 and 371. You can do a lot of things to make your Bootstrap CSS and components more accessible. When building forms, use labels with a label tag for every input field. If you don't want the labels to display, you can hide them with the SR for screen reader only class. With the has feedback class and the proper icon, Bootstrap fields will show a small icon on the right. But this is not accessible by itself. To make it accessible, you need to add both a text description and the ARIA describe by attribute, which we talked about earlier. When using glyphicons, you can make them more accessible by adding descriptive text. but you can also hide them with the ARIA hidden equal true. The Bootstrap navigation menus and nav bars can be made more accessible by putting the role equal navigation on the parent element. This is why, and we've talked about this before, you are really and truly never done creating a website, because once you think you're done, for lack of better words, you kind of start to get into maintenance mode, where you're going to add all of these things that are important. And I'll let you look at the rest of those yourselves. So in this hour, we talked about what accessibility is and how you can add accessibility to websites. So the Q&A, there's 2 questions here on page 371. First, are there laws about website accessibility? The answer here, and it's not, I don't think it's meant to be evasive, but it says it depends on the country you live in and the municipality that you live in. You should always act as though, yes, there are laws. So you should make your site as accessible as possible to everyone. Is there any special way to make video accessible? You should always have a transcript of the speech in the video. Probably the best way. All right, the quiz on 372 and 373. Number 1, which is more important, accessible design or inclusive design? The answer is C, they're both equally important. Number 2, which of the following is not something you should consider when working on accessibility? And it's B, the number of images. Number 3, what makes this HTML less accessible? And the answer is C, the link is not descriptive enough. You should never have click here's. We've talked about that before in other classes. Number 4, what attribute points to the idea of a block of text that explains a non-textual element like a video? And it's B, ARIA, described by. Number 5, where do you place skip link navigation or skip navigation? The answer is D, at the very top of the web page, just after the body tag. Number 6, why do you need the tab index attribute on in-page links? The answer is A, because some browsers won't focus. Remember, that includes IE and Chrome. So we're not talking older browsers. Number 7, true or false, use headlines in a numerical hierarchy to enable assistive technology devices to create tables of contents for web pages. That's true. Number 8, what are the ways that color can cause accessibility issues? And the answer is D, all of the above. Number 9, which Bootstrap class allows you to hide from all but assistive technology devices? It is CSR for screen reader only. And number 10, what does AT stand for? And the answer is B, assistive technology. So we're going to come back and go over the last chapter that I have to make a tape for, which is chapter 3, which starts on page 375 and is called Using Less and Sas with Bootstrap. So I'll be back with that shortly.